Okay, that's the best kind of introduction I could possibly get. You know, sometimes people do these really long introductions and they mention that I'm a lawyer, which is a little bit embarrassing. Thank you for not doing that. That's the right kind of introduction. I do what I do because I think the country is at risk. Anybody in here think the country's at risk right now?
Yes.
It's to say that today feels like a horrible understatement. The country's in a place today that I never expected it to be in. I'm 59 years old. My first election was voting for Ronald Reagan. I'm a Reagan kid, right? So I was 18 years old. I got a chance to cast a vote for Ronald Reagan. I had a vision of America as the shining city on the hill, a beacon of light during what could have been very dark times, an overcomer of communism, the destroyer of the Iron Curtain. I remember the words, "Tear down this wall." It was a very different time in American history. We believed that communism had been vanquished. We believed that Marxism had been relegated to the ash bin of history. I believed that for most of my adult life. And unfortunately, recently, I've been proven very incorrect. Anybody in here reading Mark Levin's new book? Raise your hand if you're reading Levin's new book, American Marxism. If you're not, I'll tell you, it's not an easy read. It's not an easy read in that it's highly technical, it's very dense with information. And one of the most interesting things to me about Levin as a writer, he's a friend, I know him as a talk show host like you guys do as well. He's very bombastic, he's pretty aggressive. That's not how he writes at all. A lot of these talk show guys, when they write a book, the book is very reflective of their on-air personality. In fact, it's almost like a regurgitation. It's usually not worth buying because basically it's pages full of what they say on air. Mark's books, to the contrary, are incredibly scholarly, very well researched, tons of detail, tons of original source material. Again, it can be an overwhelming read. I'm not saying that to discourage you. I encourage you to read it, but I want you to understand what you're going to get into if you read it. For me, the most important part of the book is the very beginning of the book. I would say even more than the beginning, it's the title of the book. So when I bought the book, I didn't understand the title. The title is American Marxism. It seems simple enough. And I thought that what Mark was going to be writing about is the idea that Marxism is coming to America. And that we need to be warned about this, and we need to be thinking about this, and we need to be aware that this is coming to America. And I couldn't have been more mistaken. In the opening pages, he took my breath away. And I know Mark personally, but I will tell you, reading this took my breath away because what he says in the opening pages of American Marxism is we live in a country that's Marxist. Not that Marxism is coming. He says, I've been warning you for years that Marxism is coming, but Marxism is now here. And the reason he calls the book American Marxism is because Marxism is just a political ideology. It has its own flavor wherever it pops up, right? Whether it was in the Soviet Union, whether it was in essentially totalitarian fascism like we saw in Italy, whether it's in Maoist China, whether it's in Venezuela, it's not the same thing because it's just a philosophy. And how a philosophy is lived out in the real world is always different, depending on the culture, depending on the political history, depending on the wealth of a country, the circumstances of a country, the size of a country, the power of a country, the godliness of a country. Because at its core, Marxism is anti-God. It has to be. It's anti-God, it's anti-family, it's anti-human. And so we look at that and when you read that in Mark's book, if you're reading it, and if you're like me, you thought, what? We live in a Marxist country? You know, I see you're wearing the shirt with the American flag on it. That's my country. That's what I think of. I think of that with pride, and I look at that American flag. I don't look at the American flag and think, oh, that's a symbol of Marxism. I think of the hammer and sickle when I think of Marxism. So this is a mind shift for us, at least it was for me, that was pretty radical. I've been in politics for about 11 years now. I came up through the Tea Party movement. We were just talking, we met early on in the Tea Party movement, way back in 2010. So we go way back, a lot of us go way back to then. And I thought things were bad in 2010. And I was right. Things were bad in 2010. You know, in 2010 we had a deficit that was out of control, we had debt that was out of control, we had debt ceilings constantly being raised. In 2010, a lot of us came out in force and we elected the largest swing class in the history of Congress since 1938. It was incredible. We thought the world was going to change. We thought Washington, D.C. was going to toe the line, and then nothing happened. It's pretty devastating. I can tell you, for me on a really personal level, it was really devastating. You know, I had quit my job, my career to be in politics. I didn't know how to make money in politics. Patty and I had spent all our money to the edge of bankruptcy, and it was totally worth it if something changed. And when nothing changed, it was pretty devastating. Like, what am I doing? What are we doing? Me and Patty were sacrificing for the kids, all of you who were involved, all the Tea Party folks who came out. We sacrificed, we worked, we did what we were told to do. We exercised what we learned was civics in 8th grade, right? You elect people who are good people, who say they're going to do the things you want them to do, and then they go to D.C. and they do them, except for that didn't work. Then what did they tell us? Oh, 2012, if you just get the Senate, because we only have one house. And it's really going to take 2 houses in order to change the culture of Washington, D.C. So you did. We did. We all worked. We gave money. We spent money to PACs. We sent money to candidates. We walked and talked and knocked on doors. And we elected a Senate, and it was a heady time. We had the House and the Senate, and everything was going to change, and nothing did. Nothing changed. I was devastated. I was going to leave politics. That was my plan. Because I felt like, look, I was called to do something. I came to do it, but I'm not stupid. I'm not going to do the same thing over and over and just hope for a different result. We all know that's the definition of insanity, right? The old cliche. And so I didn't want to do that. So I was going to leave politics. And I'm really blessed. God intervened in my life. He brought a mentor to me, a guy by the name of Tim Dunn, and he said, you need to stay in politics. You can't leave politics. And I said, oh yes, I can actually. Very comfortably. I don't need the attention. I don't need the accolades. I'm not interested in that stuff. I'm just a regular guy. I want to go back to my kids, and my horses, and coaching soccer. That's what I want to do. And he said, you know, here's the thing. We got to fight. No matter what. He said, we got to fight. And I said, I don't know how to fight. And he said, I don't either, but we got to fight. And I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, we'll figure it out. And that's literally why I stayed in politics. It sounds so simple, but I realized that I had an obligation to fight. Even when I didn't know what that meant, I had an obligation to fight. I had a duty to fight. In this country, we don't talk very much about duty anymore. If you read the founders, there's a lot of talk about duty. If you read that era and on through the Civil War, Americans understood the concept of duty. Duty means that we do something because it's right, even when it doesn't benefit us. Mostly when it doesn't benefit us. We just do it because it's the right thing to do. We're not necessarily going to see the results. We're not necessarily going to profit from it in a monetary or a political sense. The fruits of our labors may happen long after we're gone, but we do it because we have a duty as human beings to do it. And that's what I learned in 2012. I had a duty to fight. I'd been given this position. God only knows why, and I mean that genuinely. God knows why, I don't. But I was put in this position where I had a modicum of influence. And Tim convinced me that I couldn't leave because it was my duty to stay. You know, doing your duty is not easy. It's not fun. It doesn't win you friends. There are no accolades for doing your duty. There's no award because you did your duty. Your duty is generally done in the dark. Nobody knows you're doing it. You just do what you're supposed to do. John Quincy Adams was the only president to serve in Congress after he was the president of the United States. It's hard to imagine doing that. I struggle with that idea. Like, you're the man. You are the president of the most powerful country on earth, and after you're out of office, you decide you're going to run for Congress, and you're going to be one of just a whole bunch of people. And frankly, when you start, you're going to be a backbencher, right? You're going to have no power. You're not going to have committee chairmanships. People aren't going to follow you around. And, you know, back then they didn't have the cameras to take your pictures and all that stuff. But you're just going to be another guy in Congress. And he did it. And he did it for one reason and one reason only. He was a fierce abolitionist. He hated slavery. He thought it was an abomination. He thought it was a sin and a stain on the country, and he was going to spend the rest of his life fighting against it. And he had been president. He had done what he could do as president, and so he went and he ran for Congress. And he served in Congress. and he was known as the hellhound of abolition. There was nothing else that he cared about. He proposed no other legislation. He wouldn't talk about anything else on the floor of Congress. He was a royal pain in the backside to everybody else in Congress. And abolition was going nowhere in Congress. He served in Congress for 17 years. And in that 17 years, he accomplished nothing. Literally, nothing. No bills, nothing came out of committee. They hated the guy. They hated him so much they passed a special rule, which was the John Quincy Adams gag rule. And they said, if you speak about slavery again on the floor of the House, then we will hold a censor trial and we'll censure you. And he thought, that sounds like a good idea. I get a week to talk about slavery. And he did. And they censured him for it. Unbelievable. And he kept fighting and fighting and fighting. A reporter came to him near the end of his 17-year tenure in the House of Representatives and said, with all due respect, Mr. Adams, you're a pain in the backside. Us reporters, we got to cover you, and you're not going to accomplish what you said you're going to accomplish. You're not going to accomplish what you believe in so much. Why don't you just quit? Just shut up already. Just stop. You drive everybody here crazy. You drive the media crazy. We're tired of you. And he said, duty is ours, and the results belong to God. 17 years. Brings tears to my eyes. Can you imagine 17 years of fighting for what you believe in and accomplishing nothing along the way? But see, God always has a plan. And often we don't see that plan. I would say mostly we don't see that plan. We look at the universe through a pinhole. God sees all of it all at once. He had a plan for John Quincy Adams. And Adams knew that, but he didn't know what the plan was, so he was willing to keep going because he knew what his duty was. In his last term in the House of Representatives, he actually died in the House of Representatives. If you go to Congress, you can see this. It's now in a room outside of the actual House. It used to be the floor of the House, and there's a marker in the floor where he fell. He had a stroke on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. I think it's called the ladies' cloakroom where they brought him in now, and he died in that cloakroom. It was an anteroom to the House chamber at that point. He died in there. But during his last term, there was a young freshman who came into the House of Representatives who really admired John Quincy Adams. And he followed him around. Imagine that he was an ex-president. And this young guy, he decided he wanted a mentor under John Quincy Adams. He wanted to understand what made this man tick. He was a fierce abolitionist himself. And he followed him around and he learned from him. And he learned Adams' plan for doing away with slavery. He was pretty lost when Adams died. But they became such good friends that he was actually asked to be one of the pallbearers at John Quincy Adams' funeral. That man, by the way, lost his next election. He didn't come back to Congress. And he ran again. And he lost again. And he ran again. And he lost again. And he ran a third time. And he was elected President of the United States of America. And that man is Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator. So you want to know what it means to do your duty? If you want to understand why you do your duty, it's because that kind of thing happens. And we don't know. Our job is not to fight and be victorious. Our job is to fight. I don't know about you guys. I'm in a fighting mood. I've had it with what's going on in this country. And not just in this country, I'll be frank with you guys right now. Has done such an extraordinary job. You guys are legendary around the country. I talk about it. Grant talks about it. Everybody knows. Do you understand what you guys did here in this room tonight? There's over 100 people in this room on 6 days' notice. Give yourselves a hand. That's unbelievable. You guys are a ferocious fighting force. And here we sit today in your great state of North Carolina, and we can't get the cowards in the Senate to take a vote. Yep. I'm going to call some people out today for what they are. And I'm going to say some things, and I apologize because I'm going to be unpolitic, and I'm going to do some things I don't usually do. I'm going to be a little bit, maybe downright unpleasant. And I realize it's not Southern, I'm not being as genteel as maybe I ought to be, but I am frustrated. The key person in your Senate, the person who has the key to whether Convention of States passes here and becomes the 16th state is Senator Berger. Senator Berger has been a friend to Convention of States in the past. I mean, let's tell it like it is. He's voted for us, he supported us, and we appreciate that. And we reciprocated. A lot of you folks went out, you walked and you talked and you knocked for a lot of these senators, a lot of these members of the House of Representatives, and I actually never thought I'd be standing in front of a microphone saying what I'm about to say. I thought Senator Berger would be an ally of ours in this fight. I will tell you that we have tried for, I don't know how long, Grant, have I tried to have a meeting or a phone call with Senator Berger? Months? Months. Ignored. Ignored. Not even refused, to be frank. Just straight up ignored. We have donors in this state that are literally the biggest donors in the state of North Carolina that support Convention of States. They're the biggest donors for political offices. They've helped elect more people in the state than anybody else. They've called Senator Berger. You know what? Normally Senator Berger literally answers their phone calls. They have his cell phone. They don't normally leave messages because he normally knows this is somebody really important. I got to take this call. He's ghosted them. Ghosted. Literally, they're telling me, like, we don't know what's going on because he's never done this to us before, right? You guys have literally put in thousands of emails, over 1,200 calls, no response. What's going on, Senator Berger? Are we on Facebook now? Or did we go live? Okay, we couldn't get live. We'll have a recording. We'll put this up for him. Because I don't do the stuff behind the scenes. I want to know. Phil, what's up, buddy? Cat got your tongue?
You made a comment?
Yeah.
This group to know, and we would love to have you help us make phone calls. We've actually called, as of about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock this afternoon, 10,949 COS supporters in North Carolina since May 20th, asking them to make a phone call to their legislator. One of you all may have been the people that calls. So
over 11,000, like right at 11,000 calls.
11,000 phone calls since May 20th.
That's unheard of. So I don't understand. We got Senator McGinnis, who is just absolutely opposed. Under no circumstances will Senator McGinnis vote for this. Welcome to the Communist Party, Comrade McGinnis. I'm going to be blunt. Look, today they passed a $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill in Washington, D.C. Your grandchildren won't be able to pay for that. And McGinnis and others like him, Berger, Perry, John, whoever it is right now, what are they watching? Are they watching cartoons? Like, I don't get it. Do they not see the news? Do they not understand that Washington, D.C. is burning to the ground? Do they not understand that the Marxists are in the White House? The Marxists are running the Senate. The Marxists are running the courts. The Marxists are running the House of Representatives. And they are actively working to destroy our country. And you've got people like McGinnis and Berger and Perry and Johnson and these other senators. And what are they doing? Like, oh, well, we don't want to do a convention because it's scary. Yeah, I'm scared too of the Marxists. So today, I'm just going to say it bluntly. If you don't vote for Convention of States and you're in the Senate in this state, then you're with the Marxists. You're with the fascists. Okay, so you might notice that there's a little bit of change in tone in me. I'm gonna try to be nice, but I'm struggling. See, if you had asked me 6 months ago what was going on in America, I would say we're having a fight for the heart and soul of this country. That's what I would have told you. We're in a fight, okay? I don't say that anymore. Things have changed. We're at war in the United States of America. And I'm going to be blunt. I don't mean that metaphorically either, okay? I grew up during the Cold War, right? The Ronald Reagan era. That was a Cold War. We called it a war for a reason, because the people that we were at war with intended to destroy the United States of America. Is there anybody in here that thinks that the people who are in the White House and the Senate and the House that run those things, do you believe that they want to destroy America? Yes. Gosh, why would you believe that? Maybe because they say it openly? They say they hate our country. They say that we are founded in racism. They say that we are irredeemable. They say that this country must be torn down and destroyed. And in fact, not only do they say it, but last summer they lived it out. Riots all across the country, $2 billion worth of property damage, 27 people dead. And they not only apologized for it, they encouraged it. That's who's running our country right now. And here in this state, Senator Berger, Perry, McGinnis, Johnson, whoever else it is, these people, they're going to fight us. We're now their enemies. I don't know what's wrong with these people. We're at war. I'm at war. So what's it mean when you're at war? Let's intersect these two things, war and duty. What's it mean to do your duty when you're at war? See, when you're at war, and I know we got veterans in the room, people who understand this better than I do, when you're at war, it's 100%. There's no 75%. You're not 50% 1 foot in war and 1 foot out of war. When the bullets are flying, when you're at war, when everything's at stake, when it's existential, you're all in. All in. That's your duty. Some of you might have heard the story of Martin Treptow. Treptow was a private in World War I. Reagan read Martin Treptow's diary at Normandy when he was celebrating the D-Day advance on Normandy when he was president. And Treptow's diary said that in his pocket, he kept this in his pocket, he died in World War I. And he was only a private, and he said, but I will fight as if the whole thing depended on me. He was a private, he commanded nobody, he was in charge of nothing. He wasn't 50%, he wasn't in 75%, and he was fighting for liberty, and he was 100%, and he gave his life. I used to say that I didn't expect that much of you. That I didn't expect you to have to give your life, that what we're being asked was not as much as what was asked of the founders or all the men and women that have given so much for so long so that we could have liberty. I used to say that I didn't expect that we would really have to sacrifice like that. I don't believe that anymore. I'm asking you to sacrifice. I'm asking you to give everything. See, today what it means to sacrifice is you speak the truth. Today what it means is that you're going to go into work tomorrow and somebody's going to say some insane thing like America is a fundamentally, structurally racist country. And instead of doing what you want to do, which you just want to, and I know I want to sit back like, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to cause trouble. I'm going to end up in HR. I might lose my job. Somebody's going to be mad at me. That person's actually a friend of mine. I don't want to offend anybody. We're sitting around a table. I don't want to be that guy or that gal that causes the trouble. We're way past that. You have to be that guy or that gal that causes that trouble. This is not easy. So I come from a very small family. It's me and my brother. My dad has one sister, my aunt. 10, 11 years ago when the Tea Party movement started, she's very leftist. And she started reading the Huffington Post about the things that I was doing politically, and she decided that I was a Nazi. It's ironic, I know I'm a Jewish Christian, it makes it extra ironic. I didn't say she was smart. But I loved her dearly. When I was born, she was 13. She was my first babysitter. As I was growing up, she was my only aunt. So many fond memories of growing up with her. She was so fun, my Aunt Sherry. She's just an incredible woman, just full of life, and she decided that she hated me. This is what we're going to face. I was talking to John outside. He's got similar family issues going on. If we're going to take a stand, this is what we're going to face. We're going to face social ostracization. We're going to face family members who won't talk to us anymore. I see a lot of folks in the audience have grandkids. You got adult children. A lot of them have gone woke. I know, because by the numbers, that's just the way it is. And I hear all the time, my kids come over for dinner and I don't want to talk politics with them because it's just going to cause problems and then they're not going to want to come over for dinner anymore. I'm going to say something really hard right now. your silence is going to be complicit. Because your kids are saying this stuff and they're spreading this virus and they're teaching it to their kids and they're saying it among their friends. And if we don't stand, if we don't say the hard things, if we're not willing to do our duty, how can we expect that of anybody else if we won't say it at the dinner table? If we won't say it at the PTA meeting? You know, one of my churches, a church I belong to in Texas, they shut down during coronavirus. They acted all proud of themselves when they reopened. They reopened for 2 weeks. That's big, fiery sermon from our pastor. You know, we got to do what God expects of us, and we got to stand in fellowship, and we're not scared of no virus. We're Texans. And 2 weeks later, they shut down again. I tried to talk to the pastor. He wouldn't even speak to me. Literally wouldn't respond to me. So we left the church. We loved that church. I had a lot of friends at the church. And we left that church. Okay, because that's my duty. Right? First I ask, try to talk, and then I got to go somewhere else that reflects my values. And so I'm asking you guys, we got to do these things. You're going to be at a PTA meeting if you're a parent, and somebody's going to say some crazy stuff. They're going to talk about equity. They're going to talk about emotional learning, right? Emotional and social learning. Watch out for these buzzwords. It's all critical race theory. Critical race theory, by the way, let's just simplify it. It's called racism. Yeah, that's it. That's all it is. And they're going to say, somebody at a PTA meeting says, oh, I'm so glad they're teaching the kids emotional learning. And you're like, oh, you mean you're so glad they're teaching the kids to be racist? And you know what? They're going to look at you, oh, I can't believe you would say something like that. That's so offensive. And my response would be, yes, it is actually really offensive. And I'm going to have the tools to tell them why this is actually just racism. And you know what's going to happen? When I leave that room, this is what's going to happen. Everybody's going to be like, oh, he's so mean. Like, he's so terrible. Like, oh, gosh, that Meckler guy, he's so fired up all the time. It's no fun when he's around. And I won't be invited back. And I'm going to do this at lunch with my friends. I'm going to do it at work. And I'm going to do it in the airport. You know, when I go in the airport now, I got one shirt and one shirt only I wear in there. Well, I do wash it, so I got more than one. We're on tape, so I just want to wash it. It's my Hell No Joe shirt. And the reason I wear that in the airport, because it is the most in-your-face shirt I own. Right? Because I want people to know. Like, here's just Hell No, Joe. No, we're not doing this. And when I go through the airports, here's what happens. Like, first of all, I'm not wearing a mask. I don't wear a mask in the airport. By the way, if you travel, don't wear a mask in the airport. I promise you, you don't have to. I haven't done it for 6 months. Nobody said a word. They might make you put it on through TSA, whatever. I'll wear it on the plane if they make me, because there's certain things I got to do to travel around. But as soon as I'm out of TSA, it comes off my face. Nobody's ever said a word to me. I wear my Hell No Joe shirt. I'm marching through the airport, and people do this. So first of all, everybody's like this, right? And it's either it's like they're following, like they just tell, like, whoa, that guy's not wearing a mask. Oh, so scary. Or they look at me like, whoa, that guy's not wearing a mask. And you'll see the husband talking, that guy's not wearing a mask. I never seen that. And if I see somebody, a lot of times people will point at my shirt and they'll be like, love your shirt. I spin on a dime and I go over and say, hey, take off your mask. I'm like, what? Take off your mask? You notice I'm not wearing a mask? I'm like, yeah, that's weird. It's like, you know, I do this all over the country. I travel 250,000 miles a year. Nobody's ever said a word to me. Boom, their mask comes on. Really? I don't have to wear a mask? Civil disobedience. Because if you stand, if you do your duty, if you do what's right, other people will stand. Right? And yes, people will look at you. They will, and it might be uncomfortable for some of you. I've gotten used to it over the years. I'm a funny looking guy. People look at me. You know, something most people don't know about me, you guys might have heard this story. I told it on stage. I spoke at YAF this week. When I was in college, I was a punk rock DJ. I know. Look, once a rebel, always a rebel, right? So in college, I had a blue mohawk. And I used to wear a dog collar to class. It's true. Like about that wine with studs all over it. When we moved to Texas, Amazingly, as we were clearing out our house, I found that dog collar in the trash. Not sure how it got there, but when I fished it out of the trash and I put it in my stuff, I had to sign a legal marital agreement with my wife that I could keep it, I could just never wear it. So I still have it, because it's an attitude thing, right? It's a defiance. That's why we have the shirt that says defiant. When I was in law school, I went to law school, got to law school, and I got there, and in law school is the weirdest thing. It is the most conformist place on the face of the earth. And you get there, and everybody is like every arrogant, egotistical class high school president you've ever met in your life. Like the whole school is just full of those people. And everybody wanted to be exactly the same. They all had in their mind what it meant to be a lawyer. And I lasted about a week before I was losing my mind. Because I'm the dog collar guy, right? And so there, everybody's trying to conform. I'm just thinking, I can't take this. And I was living in downtown Sacramento, and there was a punk rock hairdresser, like literally 2 blocks from my house, and I marched down one day and I said, blue mohawk. And so she gave me a blue mohawk, and I showed up for school the next day. I'm not kidding you, about half of my professors I didn't exist anymore. Like I sat on that side of the class, this class was not this way. Because they just couldn't handle it, right? And I had a professor come up to me one time he became one of my favorite professors, very serious guy, very stately looking old guy. His name was Professor Curtis. And he walked up to me in the hall one day and he said, Mr. Meckler. And I said, yes, Professor Curtis. He said, what's with the hair? And I said, honestly, Professor, I just do it to mess with people's heads. And he said, I like it. And he just marched off. So not everybody will judge you negatively for being the guy that stands up or the woman who stands up and stands out. Look, the country is at stake, right? A lot of you have seen me on my Facebook Lives on Sunday night. How many have seen the battle cry? Raise your hand if you've seen me on the battle cry. Okay, not enough if you are watching. You got something to do on Sunday night? Sunday nights, yeah, there we go. So Life, Liberty, and Levin's on Sunday night too. I realize I'm competing with them. So anyway, if you do, or you might have seen me some other time, I have a dog that sits behind me on the couch. I used to have 2 dogs now. I'm down to 1 Great Dane. His name's Levi. Levi Preston is his full name. And I named him Levi Preston after my favorite American patriot. No books were written about Levi Preston. Not a lot of research on who he was or exactly what he did in the Revolutionary War. But you can look this story up and you'll find it online. It's a legit, true story. Preston was a captain in the Continental Army. Just a regular guy. We know his story amazingly because Mellon Chamberlain, who was a 26-year-old school teacher in 1843, traveled around the country, and he did that in order to collect the stories of the last living Minutemen. Now, if you run the dates in your head pretty quick, you realize those guys were old, right? In their terms especially. We all know people in their 80s and 90s now, but back then that was like Methuselah old, right? That was crazy. If there was somebody who was 85, 90 years old in your town, everybody knew who that person was. Average life expectancy was 54. So Chamberlain is traveling around and he's collecting the stories of these guys because, you know, they don't have video, they don't have tape recorders. If he doesn't collect the stories, if somebody doesn't write them down, they'll be lost. And he has a particular view of American history. And it was a view that I had of American history, frankly, you know, when I was growing up in the 1980s. And we learned this stuff, at least, well, you know, you gotta forgive me, it might be wrong. I went to school in Los Angeles, California, so I'm not sure my history was that correct. I see another Angelino back there. It was a mess. And so he's asking a series of questions, and he's asking Captain Preston why he fought the Revolutionary War. This is really important for this moment in our history because we got to understand where we come from. Why are we the way that we are? Why do we believe the way we believe? And I think Preston is a great example. So Chamberlain says, when you went out to fight the Redcoats that day at Lexington, why did you go? And he prompts him, he says, was it the tax on tea? You were offended by the high taxes on British tea. Preston, who was, by the way, living in North Carolina, of course, because we're all great patriots go, right? So Preston's retired in North Carolina. He says, son, I didn't drink any tea. I was a farmer. We drank coffee. Boys dumped it in the harbor and that was that. Okay, so I learned that it was the tax on tea. People were outraged by the high taxes on tea. That's what I learned in public school. So we asked him, well, maybe it was the Stamp Act. You were offended by having to buy those stamps, put them on all your documents. It was really taxation without representation. He says, Stamps. The governor put those, locked them all in the armory, Governor Bernard, and that was that. That's the last I heard of that. I'm sure I never bought one. Okay, so it's not the Stamp Act. It's not the tea tax. He asked him, maybe you were reading the great revolutionaries, right? Maybe you read Paine and Montesquieu and Burke, and he said, I've never heard of those men of whom you speak. We read the Bible, Psalms, Almanac. For those men, I don't know those names. So it's not the revolutionary writers that we all think of that inspired the Patriots. It's not the taxes. It's not the Stamp Act. It's not the tea. What is it? And so he goes big because, you got to figure this out. And he knows the same history we all know. And so he says, maybe it was the heavy hand of British tyranny. You just were sick and tired of it. Preston says, tyranny? Never felt a whit of it. No tyranny, no stamps, no taxes, no revolutionary writers. Seems weird. That's everything I learned. Literally everything I learned about the cause of the American Revolution. So he asked me, why? And I want to put this in context for you guys. I think it's important for where we're at today. When you think about what Preston did and his contemporaries, they went out on the field of battle against the greatest fighting force ever assembled in human history. That's not hyperbole. The British Army at the time, the most well-armed, the most fierce, the most well-trained, the most well-fed, the most well-paid fighting force in human history. Preston was a farmer with a musket. It's like if I said to you guys, I got a great idea, the Marines are coming, go get your guns. That's crazy. That's what they did. That's the context for what they did. This is why Chamberlain is so fascinated, and he wants to understand what would motivate human beings to do that. So why? Why would you go fight? And Preston said, like a good North Carolina country boy, son, when we went out to face them redcoats that day, we meant only one thing. We had always governed ourselves. Them redcoats, they intended that we shouldn't. That's it. That's the whole of the matter. Then and today. So right now, today in this country, those people in Washington, D.C., and frankly, a lot of the people in these state capitals, they don't believe that you should govern yourselves. We have a God-given right to self-determination. We have free will. We were given free will by God Himself. We were given this country, the greatest country ever to exist on the face of the earth, where we can exercise that free will to the limit. And they're taking that away from us. And they say every day, you're too stupid, you're too ignorant. Yep. Misinformation, disinformation, you don't even know. We're going to force you to take a shot because you can't make that judgment for yourself. We're going to force you to wear a face diaper. We're going to close your business down. We're going to tell you where you can go, when you can go. We're going to give you vaccine passports, your papers, comrade.
Yes.
That's what they're saying to us today in this country. And I say, every day when I wear that shirt, which is Hell No Joe. God bless you guys. Thank you very much.